Hi, plant people, and welcome to the second season of the Plants by Wade Lee podcast. I'm your host, Wade Lee. Do you feel emotionally connected to your plants? As if in the process of caring for them, they as well are caring for you? We will have in-depth conversations with plant experts, authors, entrepreneurs, and plant personalities. Join me as we dig deep and experience the magic of plants. Hi, plant people, and welcome to the second season of the Plants by Wade Lee podcast. I am honored today to be plant chatting with Jeffery, aka Tulsa Plant Man. You all know him and love him. I am so excited to talk to you about something that we just talked about off camera, but your first plant that you posted in 2022, which is your Monstera, and you built the structure for it. Were you a plant guy when you started this Instagram, or were you just kind of learning as you were going?
Well, I started the page in July of 22, which you're referring to, and that structure that I actually used, I got off Amazon. I didn't actually make it, just to make that clear. But at that point in time, a couple people have said to me, you have all these plants, you should start some kind of Instagram page or something. And I was never a social media person at all. And they kept saying that. Friends said that. Some people at work said that. And I thought, maybe I'll try it. And so at that point, there wasn't really reels hardly. It was just a couple pictures of your plant. And that's kind of how it all started back then.
How did you get into plants? Is this something that even as a child, your parents were plant people, or just something that you found on your own?
As a child, my mom had some plants in the bay window in the kitchen, which I remember. But besides that, there wasn't a lot of plants around. And in the Midwest here in Tulsa, it's not a high plant area, especially house plants, right? But when I purchased my first house, I really wanted to make it look cool on the outside, so I got into landscaping and plants then, and I wanted to have a awesome yard. I wanted it to look like a golf course with beautiful plants all around. That's kind of how it started, and then when I started watching YouTube to find plants I wanted to use, and I started seeing houseplant stuff, and I never knew that there was variegated Monstera, or I had never seen an anthurium in my life. And I said, wow, I can bring this beauty inside my house year round. And I was hooked.
Yeah,
So,
that's so cool. How many plants do you have in your collection, Jeffrey?
I think that's a question that's controversial, to be honest with you.
It is.
Because you ask somebody that, and it can be taken a lot of different ways. Myself, I don't care. You can ask me anything, but it's I have around 100.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have 85, sometimes I have 120. It just kind of, sometimes I'll combine plants or sell a few or give a few away, but it's always hovering right around 100, which sometimes I think, oh man, my collection is growing so fast. Someone will say, how many do you have? And I'll go back and count again because I don't keep track of it on my own, and it's always right around 100.
That's awesome. What is your watering routine? Do you have like a specific routine, or do you just kind of, use your day to see what plants really need it? Or
I'm the type of person that I need a routine with everything. Just that's who I am. People that follow me know I'm a little OCD, and I don't like my plants to touch, and I have all these different rules. But I check all plants twice a week. Wednesdays and Sundays is my routine, and
awesome.
most of what I use is self-watering pots. I preach that the hard plants that you have that you can't get to grow good, it's almost always a watering issue. You use a self-watering pot, it's the equivalent of bottom watering, and they take what they want, and usually you can be successful. So I have found that to be, it also saves me time, I think. I don't have to stick my finger in every one of them. I can look at an indicator and say, okay, this needs some water. So Wednesdays and Sundays, I check every plant, and it probably takes me 30 minutes to get through everything to see if it needs it. Now, that's not with, trimming some yellow leaves off or whatever else you have to do, right? That's just kind of, if I'm doing a fast, make sure everything's watering, twice a week, 30 minutes probably each time.
Yeah, I love that you say that the thing about the OCD, because I had said to my husband, I said, I love doing this podcast because there's so many different plant personalities. And I was like, I love Jeffrey because Jeffrey was like, okay, I need to know this, I need to know this. And it's so cool though, because I can see that, meticulousness with your plants and how beautiful, what is some of the things that you like to fertilize with?
I think that's an interesting question. Being on Instagram and having a page, people want to send you their fertilizers all the time, right? Hey, can I send this fertilizer to you? Check it out. I never get a fertilizer that I don't think is good. I mean, they all work. And so, in my opinion, people are going to disagree with that, but in my opinion, they all are decent fertilizers. I like to fertilize every watering, every plant, but not too strong. And so, I said I use self-watering pots a lot. Not everything's that way, but most are, and they're all full of fertilized water. So I use distilled water on everything, and I add fertilizer every time.
This is amazing plant chore. Like, this is literally chores on Sundays and Wednesdays, right?
For sure. And to answer your question more specifically, liquid dirt is my favorite. It's not very strong, and I just trust it. So I know that I'm not going to over fertilize anything, and it's a good base. So for me, that's what I go to.
That's awesome. I like liquid dirt. I've definitely used that before in my regimens. You grew up in Tulsa. Yeah. And by trade, plants are not your trade, right? You have a 9 to 5.
People ask me all the time, what do you do for work? And I think they're surprised by my answer. And also because my page is taken as kind of a humorous, lighthearted kind of page, right?
Right.
But I'm actually an accountant in real life. And so my title is manager of financial planning and analysis. So I work for a group of manufacturing companies. I do their financial analysis, their budget planning, their forecast planning. So that's what I'm real big into analysis. Even on my page, I like to look at the analysis of different things there as well.
Yeah. And I love that. Something about that you said too about the comedy. Like, when did that start? When did you start thinking, oh, you know what? Let's just make this more humorous? And is that when you saw the numbers grow? Like,
yes. And it just kind of happened organically. I never thought that I would have a humorous plant page.
Right.
I just kind of when I started making reels, it's what I enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
And I think that if you show that enjoyment, that's what people like. If they can see that from you. And some people say, hey, you should show your plants more. And I get that sometimes. But I look at what the numbers are driving, and that's what people like to see from me the most. And overall, when I meet people in public, they say, hey, I love waking up in the mornings and getting a laugh or a smile out of your content. And I appreciate that, and thank you for that. That's the best compliments to me is that, and that kind of engagement that I get back from people.
Yeah, well, same. Since day one, I was like, who is this plant guy? Like, it was very creative and just easy to watch. And yeah, I loved your content.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Where do you see this plant journey going for you? Do you think that you would do something with plants more long-term in the future, or?
It's something that I spend a lot of time contemplating, to be honest with you. And that's when you have I have a serious corporate job on the side, right? And so it makes it difficult to spend the time on plants that sometimes I would like to if I wanted to do something more. And so there's a decision process there. I would love to do something with plants full time. Then you look at how much money are you making, what are your expenses? All those kind of things go into it. It's not that easy, just to say. But
I know.
it's something yeah, I'm sure you do. It's something I contemplate a lot and I think about, and it's just a decision that if I was to make a decision to go full-time plants, it would be a drastic change in life, and you have to think if you're really ready for that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Do you go to the plant shows like PlantCon? Have you been to any of those? Yeah.
Yeah, I went to PlantCon in Houston, and I went to the last Texas Aeroid Show in Dallas before. I know they're doing one, I think maybe even this weekend. I wanted to go to the Florida one. I wasn't able to make it, but I really enjoy going and meeting people. And when I go, I don't actually buy a lot of plants because I don't want to take them back on a plane. I don't want to deal with all that. I just want to go enjoy myself without the stress of trying to do that. So
Yeah.
but
You call yourself a plantavert.
yeah.
Explain that to me.
I'm sure that term was probably around before I thought that I kind of coined it. But early on, I saw a video, and they were talking about cats, and I can't remember the feline travert or something. I thought,
Yeah.
man, that's an introvert that loves plants. That's a plant travert for sure. And that was my first reel that I made that actually caught on and did anything, and it just kind of is stuck. And I think it's a funny term. And now I see it on shirts and stuff. I went on Etsy one day, and it was on all these shirts, and again, like, I'm sure it was around before, but I actually made an LLC for myself for some business opportunities that I was looking at doing, and it's Plantravert LLC.
That's
so
awesome.
it's kind of fun.
Yeah, well, I can totally relate to that. I've said numerous times on this podcast, like, I love socializing with everyone online, but when I get in the room with everyone, I just act like such a weirdo, just like a wallflower, just standing in the corner waiting for someone to talk to me. But once you start talking about plants with me, then the conversation can go for hours. So yeah, I relate to it so much.
I'm the same way, and I've also said that having an Instagram page where people see you every day changes how you are outside of it too. I've become way better at talking to people because I make a fool out of myself on Instagram every day. So now it's not as big of a deal to go talk in public or talk in front of people. It's actually helped me a lot, to be honest.
Yeah. What helps you with your creative process in creating the reels that you do?
What I like to, I usually start with the audio.
Yeah.
And I go through audios and I just listen. And if something catches my eye and I think it's funny, I look at it and go, can I take this and make it plant related?
Yeah.
And so usually sometimes I start from the idea, but it's harder to find audio to go with an idea than it is for me to come up with a plant related way of showing a funny audio. Right. So that's typically what I do. I have a book where I write down ideas that I can go back to later if I'm having trouble finding something that I think maybe I can do something later on as well.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's a great process to write it down because you can always, like you said, come back to it. What is your favorite reel that you've created?
That's a difficult one. I haven't put a lot of thought into it. There was the Plantravert one I liked a lot. I did one on gateway plants early on that caught on, and people started talking about what is their gateway plant.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the Monstera that you brought up. It really opened it up for me. There's one where I spin a Miracle Grow bottle on the ground. It has a bunch of shoes around.
That one.
That one really caught on. At one time, that was my number one viewed all time. It's been passed now from some others, but that one was one of my favorites too.
Yeah, I love that one. So your favorite plant is probably the Monstera. Is that your favorite plant in your collection?
It probably is, just because it has some sentimental value to me, and it's grown to be so giant at this point.
Have you chopped it at all?
I have. When it was smaller, actually, probably 5 to 10 people have babies off of that one from when it was smaller.
Yeah.
After it's gotten big, I've chopped it only to groom it when I was repotting it or something like that, but I haven't chopped it and propagated it since it got so large.
Yeah.
I have other regular green deliciosas around my house too, so if I chop, they're coming from those other ones usually at this point.
Yeah. how has your like the way that you bought plants, like how do you usually buy them when you see them, or do you purchase plants online?
So living in Tulsa, like I mentioned before, it's not a giant plant community. So I think there's maybe three houseplant stores in Tulsa. One's like a cactus succulent place that does some of what I think you do, some of the like plant and sip kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, that's cool.
They do that, but I saw there's really only a couple main houseplant places. There's also some nurseries that have a little corner of houseplants, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
But because of that, and the houseplant prices here are for anything rare are very high because there's only two places, right? So I typically purchase online almost everything unless it was something that's common that I could get cheap here. I would just go up the street and get it here. But for the most part, it's almost all online is my plan
yeah.
buy.
And have you done imports before?
I've done two imports, and I think it's a good way to get plants. And just to be honest, both imports I did were because they reached out to me and said, "Will will you do a reel for us if we send you all these plants?" And I don't typically do promotional reels for free, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But it was such a large amount of plants that I said yes to both of those, and so I've done them only in a promotional way. But I think it's a great way to do it if you know the risk ahead of time and you're fine with that risk.
Right. And what about plant auctions? Do you ever find yourself on these plant auction apps?
You know, it's a funny question. I've never done any of the plant auctions on any of the apps at all, and I've spoken with the app companies multiple times, and we've looked at doing different things, and I just have kind of decided it wasn't something I wanted to go into.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not a big social media person, and I don't want to add all these different apps and I just don't feel like I have the time to get into all that, so I haven't.
Yeah.
I, I've almost done it like 5 or 6 times because someone will post, "Hey, I'm doing this on whatever the app may be," and I thought, "Oh, that'd be so cool," and had an offer to do it for in some other ways, but I've kind of stayed away at this point. So
I like you so much, Jeffrey. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because I find it so interesting, like as I mean, I would consider you a plant influencer, you definitely have influenced me in laughs and in times of just like, okay, I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna go plant shopping. I love that you have this, conviction, and you're like, no, this isn't part of my brand because it is a brand.
right, right.
I think it's so cool and it's so honorable because so many people in these spaces are like, I'll do this and I'll do that, and and then you get caught up and you don't really have a voice of what your brand is really, and so I think that's cool.
And I feel like people don't come to my page to get links to go buy things. And I have nothing, there's nothing against people that do that. That's what their page is or about, and that's fine. Or they have a page that's about a lot of different things. But like you said, I'm trying for the most part to have a certain focus. With that said, sometimes I will do paid promotions and I hope people understand when they watch me that I have to do that to make some money for my page as well.
Right. Yeah, you gotta bring a little bit of income with all these plants that you buy.
Right, right.
So plants aren't cheap.
No, definitely not.
They're not cheap. Do you have plants throughout your whole house?
So I'm looking around now and you asked me. I have, if you could see my house right now, there's plants everywhere because, if you have a lot of plants, there's some by the sink that are doing something. There's some in the bathroom. There's some in the,
Right.
all over. I have two plant rooms that are just, one's behind me. It's like a offset from the kitchen. I have one plant room for bigger plants I think it's supposed to be a study by the front door. It's a plant room now. And then I have pockets of plants in my living room and in other areas as well. So
With your self-watering semi-hydro, do you use leca at all?
So I don't use leca ever, and most people are surprised, but I use almost all soil, even in self-watering pots, and most people think that that's a soggy mess, your plants will rot. I use a super chunky mix. In that super chunky mix, my plants do better in it in the self-watering pots than anything else. I do use pon on occasion, but I don't use leca at all.
Wow. It's amazing. I've never used pond before.
The only time I use pon is if I have plants that aren't doing as well in soil, and I think, okay, let's try something else, see if they can flourish a little bit more in a different medium, and then I do use pon in that course sometimes.
Do you, when you repot, do you look for corms to regrow, or do you just kind of leave them in your plants?
Early on, I would try to find every corm that I could,
Yeah.
and what happened from my experience, what happens is that when you do that and you mess with the roots to that extent, when you repot your plant, the plant's going to have a downtime of a few months until it recuperates from you going through all its roots that way. And so I've kind of decided since then that if there's corms on the outside that I can see and easily get to, I remove those. And then besides that, I don't mess with the roots very often on my alocasias, and it's made a giant difference in not having to restart the plant every time I repot it. People will probably disagree with me on some of that, but some of my real big alocasias, I feel like if I would have gone through and really gone for every corm, it would have stunted the growth in the long run. And right now I'm trying to grow some of mine bigger, and I have 10 of everything. I don't need more corms, you know what I mean, right now.
Right, right. 10 of everything. I love that. What is your favorite genus of plants?
So I knew you were going to ask that, and I was curious I was thinking about how I would answer it. I would say I have two. Monstera and Alocasia are probably my two favorite.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's one or the other, but I can't probably pick between those, but those are my two favorite.
You do so well with the Alocasia, and you're using grow lights, obviously.
Yep,
A humidifier.
I am.
You are using a humidifier.
People ask, and I get that question a lot, how come, I show my Jacqueline a lot, that people really love the Jacqueline that I have, and they're always like, what are your secrets? And to me, the biggest one, and I tell everybody this, and I feel like people maybe think it's a shortcut, so they don't want to try it, is the self-watering pot's the biggest thing to me.
Yeah.
But to me, it's the biggest thing on suffering alocasia, suffering calathea. People ask me what my secret is on my triostar. My triostar is like 5.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I'm doing is they want water all the time.
Yeah.
Every calathea just wants to soak up the water. So I think the self-watering pot is key. I have grow lights over every plant that I have has a grow light above it. And again, then I fertilize in every watering. So it's getting ample fertilizer, light, and water. Everything's being covered, I think, for the most part.
Yeah. How often are you using the humidifier?
I forgot to mention that. I have two humidifiers in this room behind me, and I have one in my other plant room, and they run 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to keep the humidity high here in Oklahoma. It's very humid in the summer here, but it's hard for me to keep it high. So my goal is 60 to 65, and that's about as high as I can keep it. And like I said, they run all day, every day.
Yeah.
I go through a lot of distilled water for them.
And what about anthuriums? You have anthuriums in your collection.
I do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that you can't grow anthuriums well unless you have them in some kind of grow tent or cabinet or something like that. And all mine grow, again, it's about 60, 65 humidity, so you can't really call it ambient, I guess. Some people say that it's ambient, but
right.
It's
a little push from
a little bit, right? But they do pretty good. I think they would do better if they had more, but it's just I need to build a IKEA cabinet, I guess, but I haven't done it yet.
You don't have one, no.
Or
a grow tent?
I have one, but it hasn't been built yet, so it hasn't hit the top of my plant priority list yet.
Yeah. And grow tents, you don't have like a little greenhouse or?
I think it'd be awesome to have one. It's just, I think I have 2 plant rooms already, and at some point you got to go, okay, you need to slow down a little bit.
Right. And the full-time job.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like 2 full-time jobs most of the time. So.
Oh my gosh, I know. And you post every day.
I've slowed down a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but my goal usually is almost every day. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And you find that consistency helps.
I find, you see stuff that says it doesn't matter what time you post. It just matters that you get stuff out there. And for me, I think that people get used to a certain time. Right. And so they'll look for you at that time slot if you're consistent. So I post at 5 a.m. every day for myself. So that's what works for me, because it gives me time to also respond to comments, which is something that's big to me, is to provide that feedback in a timely manner. And I think that helps your page, your engagement, and all those things kind of go together to make you more successful if you do that than if you didn't.
Right.
The biggest thing about my page to me is the engagement that it gets. It gets a very large amount of engagement, and that's my favorite thing about doing it. And if I can't provide that on another outlet, then I don't want to go there. Even though sometimes I think, okay, and to another one of your earlier questions, do I want to do plants full time and stuff like that? If I made that decision, then I would go do those things as well, because it would be necessary. Right. To try to capitalize on all the different ways of me showing plants and myself like that. But for now, I only have Instagram that I'm active on. There's a YouTube page. I don't do TikTok, although I ask myself once a week why I don't, because that's one way of getting money on the side, right, too. They pay. Yeah, Instagram doesn't pay. So, but for now, I'm just going to do Instagram and continue to try to put my attention there.
Awesome. And everyone can find you at Tulsa Plant Man on Instagram.
That's correct. You got it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for having this conversation with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it, and I appreciate it.
It was so fun getting to know you more, and I look forward to future conversations as well.
Me too.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Wade. Thank you.